January in Alaska is a good time to be by the fire. It's safe there. It's warm, too. There aren't too many systemic risks for a pilot to concern themselves with from a couch. Airborne on a round robin to a remote village is a touch more problematic. Doing it above 130 miles of frozen and snow-covered rivers will add a gray hair or two. It takes a special kind of person to do it 500 feet above the ground with 1 mile visibility and snow and a ceiling of 1,000 feet. What would be reckless in the lower 48 is just another day in the life of a bush pilot. Flying in Alaska is saved for a special breed. Call them crazy, but the rules are just different up here. The entire state is pockmarked with isolated communities separated by wilderness. In many cases, there isn't so much as a wagon trail connecting the tribes to the outside world. Even on a desolated island, you can patch together a few bits of lumber and float away. Out here, the only option is an airplane. That makes bush pilots and small piston-powered aircraft the primary infrastructure for the state. Maybe it's dangerous, but it's also necessary. Alaska is unbelievably beautiful. The only reason that the entire state of California has not already overrun it is that it is also harsh. If you are an aviator and Alaska does not hold a special place in your heart, you don't really understand what goes on up here. It is a wild west, untamed, the era when men were men and so were the women. Everyone's tough as nails. If courage and self-sufficiency were all it took, no one would ever die in a plane crash in that great big state. They'd grow a full gray head before they died in the reflection of a bucolic mountain lake. Maybe that's how it'll be in paradise, but that's not how it is now. The plane in question was a single-engine Cessna with 9,500 hours on the airframe. The aircraft was operated by a Part 135 on-demand air taxi service. It was a positioning flight, which meant that it was being flown under the less restrictive Part 91 rules. Elevated terrain around much of Alaska makes IFR flying impractical for bush pilots. Turboed pistons cost a lot and aren't found in great abundance in the tundra. Normally aspirated Cessnas and Pipers have a hard time getting up high enough to meet minimum instrument altitude requirements. Weather is dynamic across the state, and weather reporting locations fit the profile of remote wilderness, which is to say that weather is an unpredictable art for pilots to master. Though the regulations for visual flight rules are essentially the same in Alaska as they are in the lower 48, in practice they are substantially more malleable. The plane departed from Crooked Creek for the cross-country flight to Aniak, Alaska. It was 65 miles one way, a short hop to get the pilot and aircraft back to home base. As he approached Aniak, the weather began deteriorating. The pilot was forced to circle 7 miles east of the airport to wait out an SVFR clearance into the airspace. He got the approval for the approach about the same time that the engine fuel pressure began to fluctuate. The fluctuation turned into sputtering, which resulted in decreased RPM. He was 500 feet above the ground. There wasn't much time to react. The Cessna collided with the surface of a frozen river in near whiteout conditions and sustained substantial damage. Sometimes these things end on a high note. The 58-year-old pilot survived, though he was severely injured. In an interview with the NTSB following the accident, he explained the sequence. The weather in the area was 1 mile of visibility with a ceiling of 1,000 feet. This represents both the visibility and ceiling minimums allowed under SVFR. The NTSB had reason to question the accuracy of this assessment. The weather at Aniak at the time of the accident was reporting a 600-foot overcast with a half-mile visibility and snow. The NTSB report would catalog the undeniable inadvertent encounter with IMC as a contributing factor in the accident, but would not comment further on the topic. In the lower 48, they would have quoted the relevant section of the regulations which forbids visual flight into a snowstorm. In Alaska, they mention it only out of a sense of propriety. Still, the whiteout was a serious problem. Flying at 500 feet miles from an airport is a dangerous place to be. When the engine began sputtering, the pilot was able to see the bank of the river, but not much else. There are a series of rapid reactions for a pilot to take when a piston engine begins failing. There are switches and levers and knobs controlling a variety of different engine peripherals. Sometimes an engine can be resuscitated. 500 feet above the deck in a whiteout doesn't leave much time for thinking. Flying is the most important thing for a pilot to do. Throwing levers and switches comes somewhere behind this in the order of vital actions. You've got to go back to the original departure and the round robin to Crooked Creek to understand what happened. The Cessna had been full of fuel when it departed Aniak on the first leg. The fuel selector was on the left wing tank. It stayed there for the entirety of the first flight. It remained there until the engine began coughing a few miles short of the runway in Antioch. The pilot was initially focused on making a forced landing. He selected full flaps. The frozen river was a good spot to set down. It was, if nothing else, flat. One of the engine failure procedures, for obvious reasons, is to select a different fuel tank. The pilot selected the right tank. A flood of fuel hit the cylinders. The throttle was wide open. The engine snapped from no power to full power. The aircraft was low and slow. Trimmed for landing, when the power came back on, it was destined to upset the aircraft. Dump a ton of airflow over the elevator and it suddenly comes alive with lift. In this case, it's downwards lift. On the tail, that pushes the nose up. Paradoxically, all that power caused the aircraft to become dangerously slow. The pilot pushed the nose in response. He was in a whiteout, stressed, and experiencing an unexpected and rapid change to acceleration and attitude. Vestibular illusions conspired with the visuals of snow whipping over the nose to cause the pilot to overreact to the burst of power. The aircraft collided with the frozen river, damaging the wings and the fuselage. It damaged the pilot as well, but he was still alert and ambulatory enough to fire off a mayday to an overflying aircraft. He told them that he had crashed. No one died, so the NTSB was perfunctory. They did not inspect the aircraft. They did not dip the fuel tanks to determine the residual in the left tank. The director of maintenance for the air taxi operator submitted the required aircraft accident form, but apparently did not offer any other insight. The NTSB stated that the aircraft lost power for undetermined reasons. They blamed the crash on it. They didn't say much about the weather other than tacitly admit that it was obviously below SVFR minimums. They didn't subpoena the operator for more details or, it would seem, even give them so much as a cross phone call. They just moved on. It's tough country over the tundra. Accidents are a part of the scenery. Come in the spring and you can make an entire summer out of touring the rusted shells of those who have tried and failed to tame this beast. But they keep trying. It's in their spirit. If you're willing to thumb your nose at this wilderness, a little altitude isn't going to scare you off. In a little over a month, another accident would occur at Antioch. This time it was an aeromedical positioning flight on a small jet. 2 pilots and 3 medical personnel were aboard. Everyone survived, but a wingtip got bent when a burst of crosswind struck just prior to landing. Wind was reported at the time out of the west at 5 knots. This little nugget from the FAA's Alaska supplement goes a long way in understanding how things go up here. It states, because of natural obstructions, the reported winds may be unrepresentative of runway conditions. Even the feds are forced to wink. If you're going to fly here, one thing's for certain. There's going to be weather. Deal with it. What are you going to do? It's Alaska.